Hello and welcome to Broadband. Here at Broadband, we live by the philosophy that one needs other human beings to teach them how to be human. Our guide for today on this journey of communal actualization is Wafa Al Obaidat, the creative director and CEO of the PR design agency, Obai and Hill, the founder of the Women Power Network, and of course, the host of the Women Power podcast. I want to set the stage for this interview by shining the spotlight on three main points of focus for our dialogue. The first being Wafa and her unique human journey. Next, I want to explore the words like confidence, empowerment, and motivation, and what they mean to a successful woman like Wafa. And finally, with Wafa's support, I want to provide you, the listener, with insights on the habits of successful business owners and introduce you to some resources to achieve your business goals. Without further ado, hello, Wafa. How are you?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, we're so excited to have you. Thank you so much for fitting us in. We know you have a busy schedule, and I just got to meet your beautiful son. You know, you're lucky from a lot of perspectives. I guess that's the biggest one, isn't it?
Yeah, he's awesome. He's been, the biggest gift of my life. I've waited for him for 3 years, had, multiple attempts at having a baby. So he's my jewel.
Well, he is very precious, so he's definitely a jewel. So let me start with a blast from the past, right? So in a 2012 article titled Wafa's World, How to Stay Inspired in Your Town, you expressed the dichotomy between an inspirational London of colorful Diwali and Zaha Hadid masterpieces to a content Bahrain with a stark art scene that left you wanting for more. How important was this polarized culture shock to driving you to create your own infinite well of inspiration?
I think that was, everybody's rites of passage. You can't wait to leave and then you can't wait to come back. So after 6 years, I was full. I was creatively excited, but I really wanted to change. And I think as a business owner, I saw this huge opportunity. And I saw the need, I saw the demand, I saw the gaps in this part of the world, where in London, I felt it was super saturated. There was so much going on. And I think, one of my unique selling points is I am from here. I do speak the language, I understand the culture. So to be able to bridge this creative mindset from Europe, but also offer, it sounds really cliche, but like a localized attitude, flair to it, I felt like people resonated with that.
Right. So you felt like a little fish in the ocean that is London, but what the ocean had was a diversity of experience and a diversity of knowledge. And so let's circle back to London and Notting Hill, right? And that specific part of the world, and I've lived there as well, has inspired generations of painters and musicians and, of course, creatives such as yourself. So share with us and with the audience the story of the genesis, the start and the beginning of your PR and design agency of Obai and Hill.
So before Obai and Hill, one of the first business ventures that actually took off was I launched a digital publication called Sketchbook Magazine. And I started it from my apartment in Notting Hill because you don't need like a commercial registration to do things there. You could just launch from your apartment. And I actually used my entire, apartment, my 1-bedroom flat, and I turned it into a studio. I had like 12 people working from the living room and people working from the kitchen and people going up and down the stairs and doing photo shoots down the street. So I fully use my apartment as an accelerator to create content. And it wasn't income generating. I didn't know how to make money. I wasn't thinking about money. I was actually I was an editor of a different publication. I was pumping into this magazine. And then I got a call from an organization who said, we love what you're doing. Can you do a pop-up shop for us? So at the time I was like, what is a pop-up? And now that's obviously like, the norm to understand and know what that is. But, I got offered this space in Carnaby Street and I got a KPI. I had to bring in X amount of people per month. And I got some seed funding to do that. So I hit all my KPIs and they came back and said, listen, we'll give you a bigger check. Keep bringing in a crowd, because every time I brought in, we brought in 10,000 people for the first pop-up shop. So every time I create a space that draws in that amount of people, they hang around Carnaby Street, they shop, they go around the different areas. So I was helping the PR company achieve its goals by doing my part. So after the second pop-up, they became my client. And I just had a huge aha moment, like, okay, I can get clients and I can, pay for my time, my services, my ideas. I can actually pay some of the talent that is working with me in the magazine and I can then take that money and funnel it back into Sketchbook. So there came the birth of the agency. So my first client was actually another PR company who outsourced to me to do a series of events for them in exhibits and pop-up areas around London.
That's amazing. And so Sketchbook was so successful. It was wildly successful. And it's very easy to kind of romanticize it, right? The Notting Hill apartment packed with people. It's kind of at a scene of a movie. But were there any moments where it felt like you were at the brink of failure, like you felt like your baby was going down like in flames?
What a great question. And you're right. It's super like now, even now looking back, I remember just like the positive moments of it. But like there were so many horrible, dark moments. There was just feeling so lonely because, after 6 years, a lot of my Khaliji friends have gone back and just missing a lot of the people that I came to London with. There was also evenings where, I wouldn't have much money towards the end of the month, just waiting for my next paycheck to come in from my other, my different jobs that I was doing at the time, and just like living off frozen pizza and just like tuna salad. There was also just like not wanting to wake up in the morning sometimes while different team members would come into my apartment, aka our studio space. And I would just wake up 5 minutes before they showed up and just having, they'd have to see me in my pajamas and just like, no, there are days where I didn't want to wake up. I think maybe burnt out, like I got burnt out a lot, but I remember with Sketchbook, just doing the first pop-up shop, I remember, working for 60 days straight, 12 hours a day, because part of my contract with Carnaby Street was I couldn't close the shop down. I had to be open. So I had to do the weekend shift as well as the week shift. So there was a lot of pressure because if I didn't perform, I'd have to, go back and not go back by choice. So I chose to go back in the end just to really focus on both Sketchbook and the agency because it wasn't financially viable to be able to do it there.
So that was 60 days of working straight, nonstop, sleeping on the floor. Was it driven entirely by passion? What drove you to want to do that?
I guess my biggest sense of drive comes from making sure that I'm a great return of investment for my parents. They're very good with explaining how much they have sacrificed for me to have a great education, and they sacrifice their comfort, they sacrifice maybe their dreams, they sacrifice doing things that they want to do so I can live this incredibly privileged life and study and work abroad. And so I think there's such a strong need for me to take care of them, make them proud, and to be financially secure, and not to be at the mercy of somebody else, like as in to make sure that I'm always at the forefront of my fate and my destinies in my own hands.
Right. I mean, so you brushed up on the fact that there aren't many women populating STEM roles, career paths, and jobs, right? So how can we get more women in STEMs? And STEMs, for those who are not familiar, is science and technology and math, etc.
I think you can't be what you can't see. So I need to look up to and hear the stories of women who are in STEM, passionate about STEM, killing it in STEM, that look like me, that speak like me, for me to think that it's possible for me, right? So I think that's why we get excited when there's when they announce a female minister. We're just like, wow, if it's possible for her, it could be possible for me, right? So I think that's why people like Kamala Harris and Barack Obama are so celebrated, because they look like a whole sector of people, and it could be possible for them to get into a position of influence. So for me, I feel a great solution other than training and offering all these opportunities for women is just, I want to be just like Dash, whoever that person is, because she wants to go to space, and she's awesome and she's hijaba, and I'm modest and I want to be like her, and if she can do it, I can do it, right? So that's why I even did Ironman. I did Ironman because I saw a bunch of girls from Bahrain do it, and I was like, wow, like I know these girls, so if they can, or we went to the same school, like it just seemed so much more possible than seeing Lucy Charles cross the finish line, right? So I think that's what probably, for me, makes the biggest impact.
And you certainly cannot run an Ironman without intrinsic motivation. And in his 2009 book, Drive, Daniel Pink lists the 3 core ingredients of intrinsic motivation. 1, autonomy, or the need to direct your own life and work. 2, mastery, the desire to improve. And 3, the more personal ingredient, purpose, buying in on a big picture and investing in a shared or personal vision. So the first thing that came to mind with autonomy is a rule that my parents enforced on my sisters, but not on me, that for them to get to study abroad, they'll need to get into a med school, and only medical school. That's the only profession. Like if MIT knocks on my sister Latifa's door and says, hey, we want you to be a nuclear physicist, it's a no-go. Now, I can imagine there are many such rules that regulate the decisions of women in our culture. Can you recall a moment where you felt like your autonomy was at risk just for the part that you are living as a woman?
For sure. I think, just sharing a similar story to your sisters, my father wanted me to study finance so I can go into banking, get a secure job, get a great salary, work my way up. And I think, my mother wanted me to be an entrepreneur, and that was so important to her. I really enjoyed art class, so it had to be design because that gave me a lot of joy. But my parents together limited me to interior design. So it didn't matter that when I went to college, I still had to go with interior design, and I loathed it. It was the most painful experience for 3 years to pursue a degree that I didn't want to do. And then when I called them on it, I was like, listen, I'm not happy with this course. They're like, well, great, you can come back and you can do whatever you want from the comfort of your own home. So I said, no, thank you. I shall graduate. And I made like London my teacher. I learned from the city as much as I did from the actual college, if not more.
And so you say that you loathed interior design for 3 years, but the thing that you got out of it was the fact that you were in London, and London was the best professor, right? So do you think that Obai and Hill would have been established if you never had the opportunity of living in London?
Of course not. Of course not. And to be fair, like my agency was my name first and foremost, but I was really young. I was in my early 20s and didn't have much experience. So the Hill was, to toast the city that, taught me everything I knew about life and business and art and design and independence and myself and Anne. But also it was a way to create this perception that I had an English partner, and that worked. And I got a lot more responses to my emails, and I got projects, and people still think that I have like a global franchise, and that's the power of branding and the power of a name. So I would go to meetings and they'd be like, will Mr. Hill be joining us? And I'd be like, he will not be joining us in this meeting.
Yeah. That's another scene out of a movie. That would be like a scene in a movie, right? Or like Mr. Hill just doesn't exist, but there's a business card that says Mr. Hill on it.
Yeah, my husband used to call my office because we used to work on the same floor before we were married, and he would call me because we worked in the financial towers in Bahrain and the financial harbor towers, and so he was anyway. So he had his own office space, and I had my own office space. But he would call and be like, "Can I speak to Mr. Hill?" Like as a joke, and I'd be like, "Not available." Like, what do you want?
Yeah. So okay, it's usually a game of balance between one's social and personal lives. And I think our society places a lot more weight to social outcomes and consequences over the academic and career outcomes. So what advice would you give a young woman that was or currently is in your shoes past, who's feeling restricted by society's constraints or by maybe her family's constraints, but doesn't want to burn any bridges with her family that she loves and adores?
I think one thing that women don't do is they don't try. So they assume that they're going to get a no because they've always gotten a no or an inshallah or whatever, or doors closed in their face. So they just stop trying. Like, what's the point? And I'm surprised because I think when you actually do your due diligence and you lay the foundation and you get those acceptance letters to schools, colleges, programs, accelerators, whatever, I think you get a lot of support because you did the work. So you're going there to say, listen, I've been accepted and I want to join this, experience, or I want to travel, or, I've done my part. I'm responsible. I want this. So there are a lot of ways to signal to your parents that you are ready for opportunities without having to ask or beg or cry or have a meltdown. So I think my advice is, never stop trying. My second piece of advice is try to find some alliance in your family, as a sibling, an uncle, a grandmother, somebody who has your back, who will, validate you, who will go to war with you if needed, just somebody to just amplify you.
It's true. That's a really good point. You know, Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So you might as well give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? They say no. Oh my goodness. Okay. So the second one is mastery, right? The desire to improve. And I can't mention mastery without saying that, and you already mentioned this, you're a 2-time Ironman finisher. You're an avid footballer. So what lessons have you learned and applied in your life, in both maybe your social and your professional life, from training for competitions?
One of my biggest regrets, Aziz, ever is I wish I discovered triathlon when I was younger. Like, I was exposed to this incredible sport in my mid-20s. And I'm just like, wow, what have I been doing all my life? Like sleeping late and waking up late and watching trash TV, and what a waste of my life. And I actually feel, with all honesty, I started living when I started training. There were a couple of things that, I've never been exposed to. So I've always done sports, but getting your heart level up to a certain point and keeping it there every day over and over again, I was on such a high, like on a natural high. My endorphins were through the roof. So I was happy like all day, every day. I was just, the world could be burning and I'd be like, it's fine, we'll be fine. So I had such a good attitude. So everything in my life was in order. And, the one thing I traded off was my social life, but my Ironman community became my new friends for the next 2 years. So I trained with people who've become my friends.
Right. And I started living when I started training, are powerful words from a powerful woman. I really like that. It's a really good sound bite, and I'm sure we'll use it. Hey guys, this is the part of the podcast where people usually tell you to buy this product or subscribe to this service, but we don't have any sponsors yet. So we'll sell ourselves instead. We have 4 simple asks. 1, please subscribe if you haven't already. 2, share the podcast. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, and share it with a stranger. Start a conversation. 3, check out the show notes. You can find all the references that we've already made and are about to make on there. And 4, engage with us on Instagram and email. Enjoy the rest of the show. Okay, so I know to many this may sound patronizing, but I think that one of the most strategic, rewarding, and challenging jobs is that of a mother and a housewife. And if you think about it, it's an executive function, right? I mean, you have transferable skills like people and relationship management, you got logistic management. So should all women aspire to enter the workforce?
Tough question. To say yes would really demean any woman who's chosen to focus on raising her children full time and taking care of her household. But I mean, I can only talk from my experience and the environment I grew up in. My mother was very career driven. She took 7 years off to raise us and went back to school and then went back to a part-time job, then went to work. And the benefits of having a 2-income household is just so valuable. My mother was a contributor to my education, and she supported us equally as much as my father. And so I just admired her so much for that. Like, if she wanted to do something, she didn't have to ask for permission. She could just do it. So it really depends on your personal goals and what is normalized to you. But in my experience, going back to work, especially after having a child, I started my podcast 3 months after having a baby, brought me back to who I was and, who Wafa was before pregnancy and before having a baby. So I think, again, not that it saved me, but I bounced back just to my identity and myself because I was able to work. So just to answer your question, from my experience, working and achieving is the way to go.
Fair enough. You're obviously entitled to your opinion, and I think a lot of people hold their opinion. I'm one of those, but there are some of my counterparts and my colleagues and friends could be like, no, I mean, I want to get married and I want my wife to take care of my kids at home. And a survey conducted by the Kuwait Central Statistical Bureau returned that 86% of eligible men are active in the workforce, as opposed to only 57% of women, right? So that obviously means that there is a large number of women that are at home being housewives or mothers. So one of my real concerns is when a housewife feels like she has lost purpose. For example, when her children are old enough to be autonomous or maybe leave the house. So how can we, now that these women have chosen to be housewives, how can we support them to empowering themselves? What's their place in your woman power network?
I mean, Aziz, this is such a great question. My God, you hit the nail on its head, because I think your children can't be your job. And I think women who don't graduate from becoming manager to consultant and advisor and letting them go is really like, that's where you see them have an identity crisis, maybe at a much later stage. It's because, and not only that, but they've made the choice to sacrifice work or leaving the workplace to manage their kids full time. Then you feel like your children owe you, right? Like, I sacrificed for you. What do you mean you're going to leave me? What do you mean you don't care what I think? So there is this resentment, I think, with some moms who choose this over that. And then as their kids leave, like, they think they'll be their kids forever and they're permanent. And when they leave and they go on to live their own lives and start their own families, you see these women struggle because what am I supposed to do now? Like, my whole purpose was to take care of my children or to raise them.
Yeah. But so another one of my concerns is toxic dependence, and it's usually financial in nature. For many housewives, financial dependence can limit their freedom of mobility, freedom of self-expression, and their decision-making. So what can the housewife do to achieve economic independence?
Look, again, like, the world is changing so fast. And again, it's not, to me, it's just like, statistically, why would you put all your eggs in one basket, right? Expecting your husband or your father to whatever to be the biggest income generator for your entire family. Like, that idea terrifies me. If your husband or your dad or whoever's taking care of you loses their income because the world is changing, like, businesses during COVID have gone to zero revenue, like the unthinkable happened. So why would you decrease your chances of surviving and taking care of your family just by being a bystander to that? So for me, it's much more like economics. Like, you need to get your hands dirty. You need to like be skilled. You need to have options, and you need to be a contributor by choice. Like, you don't have to, right? But it's great for you to like have your own money. Have your, I interviewed somebody on my podcast who said, making your own money is just, there's dignity in that. And so my suggestion is, if you can work flexibly from your home, if you can start a business, if you can sell things, if you can make things, if you can like be super skilled, like, don't stop learning, don't stop being good at things. You don't have to work or make your own money, but just be ready for the, workforce. If you have to, have options, be able to add value to your family, to your society. So it doesn't have to come in the shape of like a job or even a business. Like, it just means that like, you're ready if you have to be somewhere someday and you have to add value or someone needs you, that you can do that. So I feel like that's like the least we can do, is just be active citizens and make some sort of difference in our communities, right? Even if it's through charitable work.
I know that the women you interviewed in your podcast have been extremely unique, but what are some consistent habits or traits that these successful women have in common?
A deep sense of purpose. They really want to achieve something. They want to achieve, they're really motivated. So they're not going to stop because they failed or they've fallen or they don't know how to do something. They'll figure it out. Just like being deeply resilient, just a lot of their stories is just they get knocked down and they come right up. And also just like, multiple startups, they start over and over and over again, and they just really don't give up as well. And I think they see visions for themselves that they're trying to mirror or get to.
And what's a habit that you are grateful for developing?
I don't know if there's a word to describe it, but just breaking and like gluing myself over and over again is just something I'm good at. So something breaks today. If I break emotionally, the next day I'm just like, okay, I've glued myself back. I don't know if I think maybe that's resilience or...
There's a word for it, and Nassim Taleb wrote a whole book about it, but it's anti-fragile, right? So it's kind of like you break, right? But then you glue yourself together, not only the same as before, that's resilience. It's anti-fragile, you're stronger than before, So that's what you are.
It sounds brilliant. I need all these, like you mentioned, like so many statistics today. I want them, and I want this reading list that you're reading. What is this? How many books do you read?
I'll share them with you. I'll share some. I'll share some with you. Okay, so I have all these books, and what I do is I highlight a bunch of stuff in them, and then I just revisit the highlights. And I don't really read them like front to back, you know? I just like get them, highlight what I like. And so I love to read. I love to expand my knowledge, and I like to share with people. And I think you do exactly the same thing over through the podcast. So I really enjoy doing this.
It's awesome. Yeah, I agree.
You're awesome. Okay, so how can our listeners place themselves in a good environment? How can they find the right people? I mean, you really pushed yourself to do an Ironman to find a conducive group to help you train. But how can people find that in multiple scenarios?
I do some one-to-one coaching. So I love coaching startups and different people who are starting their organization. And I feel like I get asked that a lot, like from different startups, like where do I go to find a community? Like I want to find other startups. And I'm like, create your own. Like, do you have a few friends that you know to be like, let's do a weekly group, let's do an accountability group, let's like have a weekly lunch. Like, let's go sit by like the Bahrain Fort, like there's a gorgeous little cafe there. Like, let's go sit there once a week. Let's structure this meeting. Let's talk about what we're stuck with and how can we support each other. Like everything I've ever done has been me trying to build a community around my passion project. So like, I think I don't wait for permission to find the community or to be invited. Like I actually think, okay, who do I want to be surrounded with? And I build a product around that. So like build the community that you want, even if it's a micro community around your needs, your wants, your passion. So let's be proactive and do that instead of wait for someone to design it for us. So, and if you find that you're whining about it or complaining about it, like, where is this and where is that? Like, that's a huge pain point that you're having. So like solve the problem.
I love that. Absolutely. Hell yeah. All right. So which book, fiction or nonfiction, inspired you to call to action on a personal or career level?
Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. She's the COO of Facebook. I mean, there's been so many incredible books written by, Gloria Steinem and just all these, godmothers of feminism, really, and women who've brought, reinvigorated the feminism movement in the 60s in the US. But I think recently Sheryl Sandberg talked about that kind of gentle power, which is not taking your foot off the pedal too early, not leaving work, staying in the game as much as possible, even if you're going to have a child, and just talking about how hard and lonely it is being a woman that is a minority amongst a world full of men and what it means for her, what is her playbook to success. So I think that book resonated with me, was really humanized. It was an easy, light read. So I think that's changed the trajectory. So, I mean, I love her book. It had such a strong call of action.
Beautiful. Lean In. And who's that by again?
Sheryl Sandberg.
Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook. What's an important message that you want our audience to take away from our discussion?
Figure out what your personal mission statement is. I know that's like a loaded question, but really figure out like why God made you or the universe has made you differently than everybody else. Because I think we're all just a little bit different enough and driven by different things. So figure out tap into that, because that's your compass for life. You'll probably be so much happier once you realize what your place is in the world. I highly recommend working with coaches. I'm a huge fan of therapists and coaches and all these different guides who ask you the right questions for you to figure out the answers, which are already in us, by the way, but it's about getting asked the right question. And then once you figure that out, go wholeheartedly into it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Wafa. Thank you so much for joining the dialogue. We really appreciate having you on. I learned so much just from talking to you, and I cannot wait until the next time we get to connect and collaborate.
Thanks, Aziz. I have to say before you leave, this has been such a great interview. You are really good at this. These questions were so well thought of, well researched, well structured. This is top notch. I've done so many interviews. This has been one of my most favorite because it's just, I feel like you've done your homework and you know me really well. So thank you for just putting in all this incredible effort. I know it's not easy to put a podcast, show together. So yeah, I'm a fan now and I'll be listening to the rest of your episodes soon.
Thank you. You're amazing. That honestly, my heart is full just hearing that, especially from a person that I look up to like yourself. So thank you so much, Wafa. And, I wanted to show you that I appreciated you. So I definitely had to do my homework. So thanks again for joining. And I know you had a very long day. So thanks for capping it with me. Thank you. This podcast would not be possible without your support. So please subscribe to our podcast, share it with your friends and family, check out the show notes for any references made, and engage with us on Instagram and email. Thank you.